With studs like Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, and Travis Kelce on the field last night, of course it was Isiah Likely and Xavier Worthy who went off in fantasy. We react to the first game of the season, plus give you our favorite DFS plays of the week on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day, every dayers. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk. And when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 off instantly when you play $5. We had a game last night and it was a fun one. I mean, it was messy. There was some flags, lots of big plays happening. Not so much from the guys like Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce. Derrick Henry did get into the end zone, so that was good. But besides that, Henry didn't do too much either. But Isiah Likely goes off. Rashee Rice is the clear top target in the Chiefs offense. And, are you worried about Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews? I guess let's start there.
Yeah, we'll get to Xavier Worthy and Isiah Likely if they're worthy plays going forward. And I'll leave that next. But first, this was the first thing we look at because we invested a high pick on both these guys, right? We're looking at top 3, top 4 tight ends there that we're looking at in 2024. Well, Travis Kelce, they're going to be careful with him all season long. I think this was a product of the matchup a little bit that the Ravens secondary, they lost Mike McDonald. That's a big loss. In fact, they lost a couple more guys, Anthony Weaver and Denard Wilson. So Zachary Orr was out there calling the plays. He was a little bit different than what we saw with Mike McDonald. They left the middle of the field open. Rashee Rice was jetting downfield. Then they couldn't handle the speed as well of Xavier Worthy with his 4 opportunities in the game. So look, Travis Kelce was a bystander. He didn't have to do all that much. He did his best when he was open, but the Chiefs are so good now that they can spread it around. This is maybe a little bit concerning that Patrick Mahomes has real options now with Worthy and Rice. And keep in mind, Marquise Hollywood Brown did not play. So if he comes back, that's another option in this past game. And suddenly these weapons are looking pretty good that are not Kelce. And by the way, they gave some significant snaps to Noah Gray, and Jared Wiley was looked at a few times. Carson Steele, who's kind of a hybrid fullback or tight end running back. So all these guys were in there. All of a sudden, the weapons are a lot. I think they're just going to be careful with Kelce. They're not going to force the ball into him the way that we're used to. And again, we had the decline down from 1,000 yards last year, but he revved up in the playoffs, right? He's going to be fine. I think they're just going to be careful because they're playing the long game here. They're trying to win a 3rd consecutive Super Bowl. So there are going to be games like this, but there are also going to be games where Kelce absolutely goes off old school to really feel good about where you draft him. Mark Andrews, again, maybe I'm a little bit more concerned on that side, given the way they used Isiah Likely with Andrews on the field and targeted Likely a lot.
Yeah, I mean, they're both on the field. The majority of the snaps are offenses there. I mean, Kelce played 48 offensive snaps. Mahomes played 54, right? So he was on the field for almost all of the snaps for the Chiefs last night. He just wasn't the guy that was getting targeted last night. With Andrews, he was also on the field more snaps than Isiah Likely was. He was on the field 59 of Lamar Jackson's 80 snaps. Likely was there at 53. The interesting thing with Likely is how much they were lining up like outside. He was their slot wide receiver. He was lined up like they were lining up everywhere, and he was that dude, right? And it's like he looked good while doing it too. It's not like he was just getting these small plays. He was getting huge chunk plays. He looked great out there. Isiah Likely is obviously going to be the guy we're all like wanting to go get on waivers, if you don't have a dominant tight end already. But that was shocking to me, the way he was used. 12 targets. Now, are you worried at all about his shoulder injury? Because it seems like he came really hard on that shoulder. He was down for a while, and then he just came right back into the game. Is it one of those things where he still had the adrenaline so he can come back in and maybe tightens up, or was it just like the wind knocked out of him? I feel like we didn't really get any explanation.
Yeah, the good thing is he's got a long kind of mini bye to recover for the next game. So that's always good news that he can rest over the weekend and get back on track. But he was able to come back in the game, nearly caught the game tying or game winning touchdown if they'd gone for two there. But the foot or the shoe size might have been a little too big there in the back to touch the back line. So that was encouraging. They went back to him right away after that play as well. Now, interesting thing is Todd Monken, this team didn't use a lot of two tight end sets last year in relation to other teams. Now you saw that as a prevalent thing. Now keep in mind they didn't bring back Odell Beckham Jr. as a big play threat, and I thought the Ravens' offense was rather compressed. But then I saw it kind of open up with Likely and with Mark Andrews just a little bit here. So they're going to have to stretch the field, and I think Likely can do that. He scored on a long touchdown. And I think once they got him involved, then all things started to unlock here for the Ravens passing game. So I don't think he's going to go anywhere. It just makes it a little harder to trust over week to week. And all the matchups are not going to be the Chiefs, who play three defensive backs on a regular basis. They're going to take advantage of that matchup. So we'll see how different teams approach and adjust to the Ravens now that they know a lot of the passing game is going to go through Likely and Andrews.
Yeah, and now the Chiefs wide receivers are looking very interesting. Rashee Rice started right where he left off last year, getting a bunch of targets, getting it done. It was nice to also see targets a little bit deeper down the field than they were last year. It wasn't just all screen passes, right? Now they were a lot of slants and over the middle, but it was at least 10 yards down the field. You could get it done after the catch, but 9 targets, 103 receiving yards. It did die down a little bit. Like he was just being targeted nonstop to start the game. You're like, oh my goodness. Second half, it died down a little bit. Xavier Worthy gets 4 touches and turns 2 of them into touchdowns, long touchdowns. I mean, he looked like his speed out there. It was just insane. Like he just looked incredibly faster than all these other incredibly fast players, which is saying something.
Yeah, they needed to get that speed back on the field. It had been a couple years without Tyreek Hill since they traded him to the Dolphins. They needed to get that level of player. They got him, and they used him immediately as a versatile player. Got him in the rushing attack there. He had the longest run. It pretty much was Isaiah Pacheco getting 3, 4, 5 yards. But then you had the jolt early in the game to put the Chiefs into the end zone. Then he put the Ravens away essentially with that touchdown late, their 35-yard good vertical route. That's what we definitely expected out of Xavier Worthy in this offense. Now we'll see if his role changes, if Hollywood Brown is able to return from a shoulder injury. Next game, they get the Falcons, so that could be another really good game here for this Chiefs offense and getting it to all the key targets. Now, I would say it's going to be hard to trust Worthy because, again, he didn't see a lot of work, and that work you figure will go down a little bit with Brown in the mix. But clearly they want to get the passing game going here to wide receivers. And so just be patient. I think Likely could be a little bit more consistent if he's a part of the Ravens offense and he's being treated as kind of the number 2A target on that team, right? Where Worthy, sometimes he could take a backseat to Kelsey and Rice. We know that. And Brown would also add another target into the mix. So I think Worthy, we'll see if he's an every week play. I think I would like him to get a few more opportunities there to trust. I think Likely, I want to wait and see, but definitely he should be rostered in all leagues and not just for people that have Mark Andrews. He needs to be there because he might have some independent value that we haven't seen in quite a while from 2 tight ends on the same team.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finish up here on this recap, the Ravens rushing game, it was Lamar Jackson over and over and over. Like, I mean, they just kept running him. And it was like, it seemed like a lot of design runs. He just kept taking off. 16 rushing attempts from Lamar Jackson last night. And he looked great doing it. I mean, he's so fast. He lost some weight. You can see it out there. I mean, he's always been fast, but you can see a little spring in his step. Derrick Henry, on the other hand, he looked all of the 30 years old that he is. It was not a pretty performance from him. 13 carries, 46 yards. He just didn't look like a typical Derrick Henry performance. He did get into the end zone, which is what we need, right? When you're drafting Derrick Henry, that is what you're hoping for, those touchdowns. And that did come through. Still not a great game from him because he doesn't get receptions. And that's Justice Hill's role, right? I mean, Justice Hill got 8 targets, 6 receptions, 52 yards. Anytime they were in a passing down situation, it was Justice Hill on that field, not Derrick Henry. It does make me a little nervous about Derrick Henry moving forward.
Yeah, they're essentially putting Derrick Henry in the Gus Edwards role, the power back that just gets in, and then they have to change it up on passing downs and keep that in the back of your mind that Keaton Mitchell's also lingering, right? When he gets healthy, what are they going to do with him? He's a change of pace, explosive back here. Do they work him into the passing game, or do they like Justice Hill in that role? I mean, they loved Justice Hill for a long time. He stayed on the roster because he's good on special teams. He does the little things right, and we saw that last night. I mean, he did come through when he was targeted and needed on the field. Now, Derrick Henry, I wouldn't panic. He still got in the end zone. There's going to be some really high-scoring Ravens games where he's going to be the guy in the red zone to finish a lot of drives. So when they're not throwing the ball with Lamar. And Lamar, look, his career record, he was 11-2 in his 13 previous 100-yard games. He had a 14th in this one, so that bodes well. I also think it bodes well for his running that he's got to run for his life a little bit because this offensive line still in transition with those couple of rookies up front. So I think a lot of that was scrambling as well. So not only are you getting the designed runs to get chunk runs from Lamar, but also the scrambling and running for his life and getting chunks when things break down in pass protection.
Yeah, that was a fun first game. I feel like we got to learn some stuff. There's still a lot to learn about both of these teams moving forward. And then tonight we get another game, Packers versus the Eagles. I love that there's another game on Friday night. We're going to get into our favorite picks of the week. And one of my favorite picks is playing tonight. So you got to get it in quickly here. We'll get into our favorite picks right after this quick break.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find qualified and quality professionals who are right for the roles. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. That's good news there if you're trying to put together the group that's going to put you over to big success. LinkedIn isn't just a job board for you. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, more than 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. If you're not looking on LinkedIn, you would be looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional only on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resource to hire. So they're always there to help you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Be one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, it's time to get into the prize picks of the week. Yep, we're back up with prize picks here for the 2024 season. We each do 3 here, trying to find the most compelling plays when we look at more or less than the rush, receiving, or passing yards on 3 particular players. That's how it works. It's easy to play. We'll hear more about how you can get in on the game a little bit later. But Michelle, let's reveal your first number 1 pick here in your PrizePicks grouping.
Yeah, so PrizePicks is just a daily fantasy sports app, right? So you're picking guys' projections, more or less than what the number they have there, right? So my first one, my favorite one, I've been talking him up as a good fantasy play this week. It's Packers wide receiver Jayden Reed, more than 45.5 total yards. So rushing plus receiving yards. His receiving yard projection was at 42.5. So I was like, I might as well just take the 45.5 rushing plus receiving because they do use him as a rusher sometimes as well. He's hit this number in 7 of his last 8 games played in the regular season. From weeks 10 through 18, he averaged 70 scrimmage yards per game. Again, he only needs 45.5. The Eagles allowed the second most receiving yards to wide receivers last season. I know they worked on fixing it, but we'll see how great they've done in doing that this quickly. And I just feel like there's so much hype around this Packers offense and how good they're going to be, and they're just ignoring Jayden Reed, who led this team in receptions, receiving yards, scrimmage yards, and touchdowns as a rookie last year. And no one's having hype on him, but there's hype around this offense. It doesn't make sense to me. I expect Reed to have a nice big game and a nice good year.
Yeah, that's a nice Jayden pick by you. I also have a Jayden pick. full disclosure that I'm going to give you and how this process goes. And if you're new to the show, you might not know this. If you're new to the show, first off, welcome and enjoy these picks every week. But I tend to pick one quarterback for more with the rushing yards, and we tend in general to pick all more. So we like to play more.
Yeah.
We don't like to
We're
do
a fantasy
less.
show.
Yeah.
I mean,
We
yeah.
don't like less.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into my guy. It is Jaden, exactly the same spelling, Jaden Daniels, 39.5 rushing yards. Now, this is against the Buccaneers. Now, Cliff Kingsbury's offense is going to be operating a little bit ahead of Todd Bowles' defense. The Bulls pass rush is not the same. So they're not going to have the edge to slow him down. And also the traditional run defense of the Bucs, we know, has been very good. So this is going to create Jane Daniels to scramble and make plays. This is a pretty low number for me for a guy that is going to be dedicated and designed runs. Kingsbury loves to do that. We saw it with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray often cleared this as a young quarterback here for Kingsbury. Again, I think his Buccaneers defense can be had in that aspect. They're not the same in the front seven. At least they replaced Devin White, who was not as good at this, but it still is going to be rough. And the safeties are also going to be playing back to protect against some big plays. So he's going to have some running opportunities, 39.5 rushing yards for me. And look, that's a good place to start. Get some non-traditional ones, and Michelle threw in the rushing yards of Jaden Reed. I'm going with the non-traditional Jaden Daniels to have a nice rushing debut in Washington.
Yeah, I'd feel much more comfortable going with the more on his rushing yards than passing yards in his first game, right? Like he's going to lean on his legs. I think that number is very, very fair for him there. I'm also going with a more in rushing yards, but it's with a running back. It's Jonathan Taylor against the Texans, more than 74.5 rushing yards. He just destroys them. I mean, that's what he does in his career. So until you can show me that the Texans have figured out how to stop Jonathan Taylor, I'm going to say he's still going to do it. He's averaged 135 rushing yards per game against the Texans through over his 6 career games against them. That's the most by any player versus any opponent in NFL history in a 5-game sample size, 5 or more game sample size. But Taylor's on a streak of 4 straight games putting up over 140 rushing yards on them. He can make it NFL history record if he does it again for a 5th straight game. But like last year, the Texans were a good run defense. They were one of the best in the league against everyone else but the Colts. They allowed the Colts to average 175 rushing yards over their 2 games against them last year. And all other games, the Texans allowed teams to 86 rushing yards per game. They just can't figure it out. And I expect this to be a heavy rush attack with the Colts just getting back Anthony Richardson, his first back coming back. How does Taylor not get 20 carries? There's no one else on that team. Like, this is easy for me. 74.5 rushing yards. More, hit the more.
Yeah, I'm going to sign off on this because I almost put that in the document as well. So I would have totally echoed you on this, and we might have had this double stamped here, but we do like it from you, Michelle, on Jonathan Taylor. I love that pick by you. Now I'm going to change it up and go to passing yards. I'm going to go to Matthew Stafford, 273.5 passing yards. Of course, I'm going with the more here. Lions defense is improving, but it's still a lot of things to work out. You got to break in some young players, new secondary pieces, where their pass rush be consistent away from Aiden Hutchinson. So on top of that, he's back in Detroit. He's going to have to throw quite a bit. The Rams will be in a shootout here with Jared Goff and the Lions. Well, I don't like the Jared Goff side of things as much because he can lean on the running game and get those big numbers here, where I think Stafford is going to put the ball up in the air quite a bit. And he was putting up massive yardage totals. Remember last year, he just was missing the touchdowns, and then those touchdowns started to come, and he started to be more effective. And it seems like it just must be a case of geographic history where I just always picture Matthew Stafford throwing for 300 yards in Detroit. It doesn't matter how it goes. And I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, as I said, and Stafford's going to have to put it up to keep up with Goff and that offense. So this could be his last game. He's getting older to return to Detroit. So he wants to go out nicely for kind of his secondary home fans here.
Yeah, I mean, Stafford against this Lions defense, that's a good call there. I was thinking about him or Baker Mayfield's more passing yards because I also expect Baker to have a great game against that Commander secondary, but I like this one by you with Stafford against the Lions. My last one is in another matchup that we think is going to be high scoring. It's James Cook, more than 85.5 scrimmage yards against the Cardinals. So that's rushing and receiving yards put together. He only needs 85.5. He averaged over 20 touches, no, nearly 20 touches per game. It was like 19.6 touches per game and 104 scrimmage yards per game under Joe Brady as the play caller last year. No team allowed more rushing yards to running backs than the Cardinals last season. Only the Broncos allowed more scrimmage yards to the running backs last year than the Cardinals. Without Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, we expect Cooks to be more involved in this offense as a receiver and a rusher. Like I like this 85.5 rushing plus receiving yards for James Cook.
Yeah, I like that combo as well because, again, you're not too dependent on one aspect of his game because it's so versatile and he can either take a handoff and get a chunk play or a short catch and take a long play. So you want to have the option to get access to both of those in our PrizePicks picks. And you got that here with James Cook in a totally smash spot at home with a positive game script against the Cardinals. Now, I've got a player I liked a lot in Chicago. He just was inconsistent, didn't come through, couldn't stay on the field, was unhealthy. He's now in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins. Darnell Mooney. Yeah, I always like Darnell Mooney. I want him to start doing some things here. And so I'm going to force myself to liking him more this week. 34.5 receiving yards for Darnell Mooney against the Steelers. Now, we talked about how we didn't love Drake London, facing some tough coverage from Joey Porter Jr. Where they're going to have to put the ball. I know Mooney's a bit of a deep threat, but there's been some sneaky chemistry, been paying attention between Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney. And Mooney is always been an underrated receiver. He just can't stay healthy and have the right quarterback play. So now he finally can get that with Kirk Cousins. He's a field stretcher. We know Rondell Moore is on the shelf here, so it drops down to our favorite Ray McLeod. It really drops down to him as the third receiver. They're going to have to throw to someone in this game. I think there's going to be more Steelers moving the ball than we think. That's going to cause the Falcons to put the ball up a little bit. So I think Mooney is going to be targeted rather frequently. And again, he has a better matchup here than Drake London. It's a very low number. Darnell Mooney can get this in 2 catches. And that's what I like about it. So I'm taking Darnell Mooney again. 34.5 receiving yards more in his Falcons debut.
What I like about what you just said is you think the Steelers are going to be moving the ball and put up points. All right. I like that. I hope that comes true.
It will.
If you guys want to get in on this action and put some picks in with us, especially like the ones we just gave you, if you want to go look at the other ones, there's so many options. I mean, it's crazy how many you can scroll through and pick. I will explain to you how to download the PrizePicks app and how to use them in our break in this coming up segment. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and watch the winnings roll in. Vinnie and I just gave you 6 of them, right? 3 each. So whatever you like out of those, you can decide to use those or scroll through all the other player projections and pick your favorites. The great thing about this platform is that they have an injury insurance policy so that your lineup still stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks, your picks are still alive. And this is the only daily fantasy sports app that does that. They're also giving you a free box here, basically like a free projection, because you only have to hit 1 yard on Caleb Williams in any given week of the first 4 weeks of the NFL season. And that's already just a free win right there. So if you wanted to just put down 2 player stat projections, Caleb Williams could be one of them. You only have to hit on one other one. One I didn't mention in our earlier segment, I also love Mike Evans, more than 68.5 receiving yards against the Commanders. There's no one on that secondary that's going to be able to cover Mike Evans for 60 minutes. It's just not happening. Again, to get in on this action, you have to download the PrizePicks app. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download PrizePicks today. The new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, on Fridays, we love to, submit a FanDuel lineup and share with you. This is another way to play daily fantasy sports. If you want to put in a fantasy lineup over on FanDuel, you can either go with one of ours. If you like the idea of our lineup, we'll kind of walk you through why we chose these players and how we spent, the budget that they give you in order to create a fantasy lineup. So let's start here with Vinny with our quarterbacks, because I went risky with mine. How much did you pay for your quarterback, and who'd you go with?
Well, I found a bargain quarterback, and he's the quarterback I love. So it's not really a question. And I picked him in fantasy for season long. I liked him just now in the PrizePicks. It's Jane Daniels. He's not probably going to be this cheap.
You're all in on him this week.
I'm all in because it's a really good matchup. And again, these are times to play these type of unknown quarterbacks. These rookie quarterbacks tend to have some big games right away because there's no film. And I do like that potential. And 7,000, that's a good bargain here. He was around Derek Carr money. When I see Jane Daniels around Derek Carr, first, I'm offended. Second, then I look at this and say, wait, that's a quarterback to play here. It's a flashing neon light to say, go get Jane Daniels in the lineup and start from there. That was a good spot because, again, 7,000 quarterback can afford a lot at other positions.
Let me guess. You went with Terry McLaurin for the stack.
Yeah, I'll just reveal that. I guess you're going to force me into doing that. Yes, that's my stack. It's 6,200.
I did a stack as well.
Yeah, it was just too cheap. 6,200. This secondary is not that good. And Jamel Dean is out there, but come on. It's not that good, and then you can stretch the field. This pass rush is also not what it once was. So I like the shot of Daniels taking it downfield to Terry McLaurin several times in this game.
So we went with two of the grossest teams possible from last year, I feel like, with our quarterback wide receiver stack, because my stack is Daniel Jones and Malik Neighbors.
Oh, boy.
I've been on this whole Daniel Jones will be fantasy relevant this year. I'm not saying he's going to be amazing, but there's going to be a lot of fantasy relevant games from him with his rushing, with finally having a good quarterback. Yes, he's still not going to be a great NFL quarterback. I don't need that. All right. I don't need him to be. I just need him to run. I need him to throw deep, and I need him to hit Malik Neighbors, let him do his stuff afterwards. But this Vikings offense is one that can be beat through the air. They're already pretty bad at it last year, and their secondary is only getting weaker because they just keep losing guys back there. So I went with him. Malik Neighbors a little risky because he's a rookie, but only at 6,300. I think that's one of the cheaper prices you're ever going to get him if he is what we think he's going to be this year. So I went with that stack to start. Let's go with our other two wide receivers here. Who'd you pick for your other two guys?
Yeah, I just mentioned him for a prop, but he was super cheap. It was 4,800 for Darnell Mooney, and I like having him in lineups because, again, he's a big play receiver. You don't need a lot to get that to return on him. If he's just a little bit involved, I can get even 3x on this at 4,800. So I do like Darnell Mooney there to get a good value. And then I'm going with Cooper Kupp. I like Matthew Stafford there for the passing yards. I think Cooper Kupp is going to be reestablished here as a big-time weapon. The Lions are a little bit weakened now in the slot, but they're going to move Cooper Kupp around and get him open. I think it's going to be a little easier matchup for him than Puka Nacua, who's also been banged up and hurt. So I like Kupp here. So Kupp, Mooney, and McLaurin are my choices, and I'm not paying more than $7,000 for any of them.
So my wide receivers are amazing, and I get to do this because I'm paying only $6,800 for Daniel Jones for my quarterback, right? Yeah. Like one of the cheapest quarterbacks you can play. So my wide receivers are Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans to go along with Malik Neighbors. I was able to afford both of them. Tyreek Hill was the most expensive wide receiver on the Sunday slate. I don't care, right? They're home. It's a home game for Miami. Tua is great at home. Tyreek Hill's great always, and he gets the Jaguars, like a nice matchup. And then Mike Evans, we've talked about this, against the Commanders. No one's going to be able to cover him. He's going to score at least a touchdown, probably get some deep yards there too. So went with Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans, Malik Neighbors as my three wide receivers. That is beautiful to me. Who are your running backs?
Well, this is where I was able to spend the money. I have Jonathan Taylor, and we talked about him in our previous segment of how he smashes the Texans, especially at home. Bijan Robinson at home against the Falcons, so getting 2 volume backs in there. Oh, that's very nice. And then I ended up with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to be looking good in this game against the Rams at home. Some people might be concerned also that he has the injury, so they might be a little shying away from him at first. But that's why I want to go and chase Gibbs. So spending a lot of money here, but Taylor, Robinson, and Gibbs, and none of these guys were cheaper than 8,000. So
Gibbs is in your flex. You went with Gibbs.
Yeah. Sorry, I gave that away, but yes,
No,
he's
you're
my
good.
flex play. Yeah.
So my 2 running backs, I had to go. I couldn't go as crazy high because of my wide receivers, but I still think I got 2 really good guys. I went with Devon Achane just to go for the upside of what he can do. I know I already have Tyreek Hill, but they can both go off in this matchup. He was at 7,200, kind of middly expensive, right? Not too bad there. And then James Conner is one of the cheapest starting running backs this week. I don't understand why. Like one of the cheapest good starting running backs. He's at 6,100. The Bills have lost a lot of defensive pieces. And they could be run on in certain games last year anyways. James Conner's also receiving back, like touchdown score. So that was an easy price for me to pick. And then for my flex, I again didn't have much money left. So I went with Jackson Smith-Njigba, a guy I think who have a really nice second year, much better matchup for him and against the Broncos, like slot or wherever he's lined up than getting up, going up against Pat Surtain. So I think JSN could have a nice game here as well. Who is your tight end that you put in your lineup?
Well, if I'm going to spend 8,000 plus on my running backs and one for the flex, I can't spend a lot here at wide receiver or tight end. So my choice is K. Dotton at 5,200. Just going with him. He's just too far down. And again, a lot of this ranking with the Commanders against the tight end is with Cameron Curl at safety. He's not there. He plays for the Rams now. So something to keep in mind a little bit if Sam Laporta has a little bit of a down game. But he's gone, so Cade Otton will feast a little bit as the key third target for Baker Mayfield in a game that could have a lot more points. And we're hoping, right? We got a lot of Jaden Daniels, Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, all this good stuff in this game. So I think that's going to be a sneaky shootout. I have Cade Otton. Can cash in with this if he scores a touchdown too at 5,200.
I will say the more and more I look at my lineup, the more excited I get about it. And the more I just love that I only had to spend so little on Daniel Jones because I was able to get an expensive tight end. I went with Trey McBride at 6,400. He was a top 4 price tight end on the Sunday slate. Listen, again, with the Bills, like they have issues right now going into the season with their defensive depth and their defensive pieces that they lost last year. I am, again, relying on 2 Cardinals players, Connor and McBride, but I still think both can come through. I expect Kyler Murray to also have a good game. So they're just all doing it in this matchup. I expect it to be a high-scoring matchup. And then for my defense, I went with the Texans. I think they're highly undervalued right now going into the season. I don't think 3,900, they're one of the cheapest defenses, like below average cost. And I think they're going to be a really, really good defense this year. And they get Anthony Richardson coming off, he started 4 games last year and he's barely started in college. So he could make some mistakes in week 1.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. The Texans overall should be improved playmaking defense all season long with D'Amico Ryans. They're good to be managed in a lot of leagues. I'm going with the Chargers at 4,000, just taking the cheapie. There, the Chargers will make a statement with Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter carrying over that to Michigan mentality there against the Raiders. So they'll make some plays. Gardner Minshew is going to struggle a little bit. We'll probably see Aiden O'Connell starting in week 2. Okay, that's maybe an aggressive prediction, but it actually could happen if Minshew kind of stinks it up. And look, they've got a lot of playmakers too. Khalil Mack and the back end Derwin James who can make some plays. So that's why I'm going with the Chargers. I think their defense will just be cleaned up a lot from that Brandon Staley mess from last season.
To share my full lineup here again, it's Daniel Jones at quarterback, Devin Achane and James Conner at running back, Mike Evans, Malik Neighbors, Tyreek Hill at wide receiver, Trey McBride at tight end, Jackson Smith-Njigba in my flex, and then the Texans for the defense.
Yeah, I'll run through mine real quick again. You have Jaden Daniels at quarterback, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson running back, Terry McLaurin, Darnell Mooney, and Cooper Kupp at wide receiver, Jahmyr Gibbs in the flex, K. Dotton at tight end, and your Los Angeles Chargers defense rounding things out. So look, it's all exciting until we see the games go forward and we see the actual numbers. But I'm excited. I'm excited that we have a full slate of games, all that good stuff. Chiefs Ravens just getting started, 271 games yet to go in this regular season for fantasy and reality.
Yeah, that's it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, I want you to just enjoy the first Sunday. We also have football tonight. It's going to be great. We will talk to you again on Monday. Bye, y'all.